Welcome to another episode of Shift with Elena Agar. Today, we dive deep into the world of genetic health and personal wellness with our guest, Elwin Robinson. Elwin shares his transformative journey from battling chronic health issues and addiction to thriving through a healthy lifestyle. We're going to discover how slow enzyme activity affected his stress responses, leading to profound revelations about his genetic predispositions. We'll explore his experiences with chronic pain, the pivotal role of genetic testing, and the remarkable improvements in his health after addressing root digestive issues. Elwin's story is not just about overcoming personal health challenges, it's about understanding the broader implications of genetics on our well being. We'll also touch on the shortcomings of conventional healthcare practices, the significance of holistic approaches, and the importance of hormone optimization for overall quality of life. I also share my personal experiences with genetic and nutritional testing, emphasizing the need for proactive healthcare exploration. It is a topic that's very close to my heart. It is something I've been exploring over the last year and doing different testing, and really have seen a huge improvement in how I feel, how I perform in sports, in the workplace, and just in everything that I do. My energy levels are higher. I just feel completely like a more optimized human being, honestly. So tune into this conversation, be open to what we're sharing. And as always, let me know what you think. Comment, share, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Elwin, welcome to the Shift Podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm glad we got connected. I'm so thankful for all the different podcaster match kind of platforms that are out there, because I get to meet people I would have never met through just my network. So I'm really grateful that we got connected. I'm really interested, before we started recording, I'm going through my own kind of wellness journey, and I feel like I've always kind of elevate to the next level, and the next level really to be at my top peak. But for my audience to get to know you a little bit more, tell me about kind of what you're doing. Why should somebody stick around for the next 30 to 45 minutes that we're going to be having this conversation?
Well, let me clarify for you. What's the number one goal of someone listening to this podcast? And I'll make sure it connects with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my audience are people who are either going through shifts or looking for shifts. So we are a group of people it could be career changes, it could be life changes, it could be going into entrepreneurships. So it's really just catering to people who are interested, or maybe self-induced shifts, like wanting to make a shift in your life. Because in my opinion, like life is all about shifts, and sometimes we go forward, sometimes we go backwards, side to side, and so on. So it's all kinds of different shifts, and how do we better navigate those shifts? I guess how do we do it from on an individual level, on a society level, and so on.
Okay. Well, I think the piece that then I would encourage people to focus on, which I can bring to the table in that regard, is self-knowledge and self-awareness, and potentially also awareness of others. So I've applied this technology that I'm about to talk about, first of all, to me, but then also my wife, my family, my friends, my business partners, a lot of my employees. So I feel like it's very valuable. So, yeah, just to step back for a second. I'm a kind of health person. I've been into it for a long time. That is because I've been very unhealthy, of course. I think generally that's the case. Um, I suffered with a lot of health issues earlier in my life. Both my parents were very into health and also very unhealthy. My mother had cancer several times and died quite young. My dad had ME and chronic fatigue and couldn't work most of his career, even though he was a biochemist and a teacher. So I saw quite early the impact that living a healthy lifestyle can have, because my mother would often, as well as doing medical intervention, she would do strict healthy diet, and she would do all these kind of detox regimes and only organic food, and she would listen to hours and hours of self-hypnosis tapes every day about being positive and focusing on your body healing and all that kind of stuff. And then she would get better. And then she would, as soon as she got better, she would quit all that stuff, go back to eating junk food, and a lot of complaining and negative self-talk and everything, kind of back to the kind of negative frequency, and then eventually you should get ill again. So I really saw the impact of those shifts in both directions. The tempting to shift into the more positive is a bit of a simplistic word, but maybe I like the word coherent kind of frame of mind, where energy and brain waves and heart rate and all the rest of it are all coherent, where things are orderly and make sense, and then going back into kind of chaos and indulging in drama and things that are unhealthy and all the rest of it. So um, I have done a lot of both. Throughout most of my teens and 20s, I was really very indulgent in feeling bad, I would say. I was, a drug addict, although nothing serious, but, I was, every day I was using various drugs to get by. And, um, and by my late 20s, I was very unhealthy. And I became so unhealthy that I couldn't work. And
Mm,
so that was the first, I would say, big shift in my life. And I decided that I needed to change that. And so I kind of remembered all that stuff I heard my parents saying a long time ago. And I decided to, stop smoking, stop drinking, all the obvious stuff, but also, cleaning up my diet, stop eating processed food, stop eating sugar, all the kind of basic stuff. I could barely remember it, but, just like the obvious stuff. And then I really got into it. And one of the things I noticed is before that, I would say I'd been quite a victim state of consciousness.
mm,
And I was in a victim state of consciousness. Most people around me were. And what does that mean? It kind of means to me that I did not feel like I had the ability to make my life better. And so I was very much in a state of feeling sorry for myself and feeling resentful for the cards that life had dealt me. And honestly, I would also say part of that is I was just struggling to get by week to week. I was pretty much doing a minimum wage job. Um, and I had loads of credit card debt, as I said, just struggling to get by financially, but also struggling to get by, like, when you're a drug addict, you're basically going from hit to hit, right? Because you don't want to face the come down or the withdrawal or whatever.
mhm,
So there's a lot of just like living moment to moment, trying to avoid bad problems and reacting to life. And then when that health crisis hit, not only did I start like cleaning up my diet, but I also kind of reevaluated the people that I was spending time with, and even my whole view towards life. I started to think about, um, do I actually want to achieve something in this world? And do I actually want to contribute something? Do I actually
mm,
want to, which had never occurred to me before. I know a lot of people, it's part of their thought process throughout their entire life, but it wasn't to me. Again, I was such a victim in my mindset that, why would I contribute anything? I'm so hard done by, life is so difficult, blah, blah, blah.
mm,
So that's the first time I was really thinking about it. And within a few years, I built a quite successful health-based business. I was, providing different herbs initially, and then other kind of things that support health. I had a book. I had several online courses. I would travel the world and do speaking and all of that kind of stuff. And long story short, that went on for a good 10 years
mm,
where I thought I was doing well. And in many ways, I was, because I was a lot healthier in my 30s than in my 20s. But right at the end of my 30s, at 39 years old, I started to get a stabbing pain in my right rib cage kind of area. And I went to obviously a doctor first. Even though I was into alternative health, I've never been like anti-doctor or anything. I'm happy to go to a doctor. They could not find anything. Then I went to a specialist, different private doctors. They couldn't find anything. And they did the full gamut of tests on me, like extra from what they'd normally do, MRIs and CTs and endos and everything. And so then I was like, well, okay, I know about this alternative stuff. Let me go to alternative practitioners. So I went to a naturopathic doctor, functional medicine doctor, nutritionist, all kinds of those kind of people. None of those could work out what was going on with me. Then I was like, okay, well, maybe it's a structural problem, this pain, more than like a health problem. So I went to chiropractor, physiotherapist, osteopaths, craniosacral therapist, all of those kind of people. They couldn't find a problem. So then I started getting desperate, and I was like, well, maybe it's all in my head. Maybe it's an emotional problem. Maybe it's a psychological thing. Maybe
mm,
it's a placebo. Maybe it's something like that. And so I started to, learn. I started to see a therapist, and I started to see all kinds of maybe more, what's the word, left field people to try and work out if there's something else going on inside my mind or inside my emotions, and they couldn't work out what was going on with me.
mm,
And I don't regret doing all that. I learned a lot from each of those different things, and just to explain the situation. So I know, like, I think over 50% of people over 40 have chronic pain. So I know there's nothing unusual about that. But this was a very specific type of pain. It's a stabbing pain. I've spoken to women who have said that compared to childbirth, it's actually a worse pain. Um, and probably more importantly, painkillers don't work on it. So the classic kind of NSAIDs just had no effect. And then usually often there are times when the NSAIDs don't work, like Tylenol, and then you normally go to opiates. But for this particular type of pain, opiates actually made it significantly worse. So I
Mm.
didn't do that either. So this was like a pain that there was no escaping from. And so, as you can imagine, Elena, I was desperate for a shift. I was hungry
Yes.
for a shift, and it was a shift from being in this chronic pain. But this pain was affecting my digestive system. So it also stopped me eating because every time I ate, I felt worse. Now, I did still
Mm.
eat, but it made me reticent to eat, let's just say. And I'm 6'3". I'd always been thin, maybe 150 pounds, something like that. But I got down to 120 pounds. I would say, pretty much emaciated, especially for someone who's still trying to eat. And I had loads of other symptoms. I felt cold all the time. I had anxiety. I had neuropathy, all kinds of stuff. So then, and as I said, since my 20s, I'd kind of flipped from being in this, what I call victim consciousness, to being in this, like, you can create your own destiny kind of consciousness, like looking forward, not backwards, right? Focus on what you can control, not on what you can't control. Focus on what you want to have happen, not on what you don't want to have happen. Like, very much, I can shape my own destiny. So ironically, when I came across this, I was not very keen, the idea of genetics. But I came across this platform that said, look, if you've ever done a thing before like 23andMe or Ancestry, which I had, you can upload that data to our system, and within a few hours, we'll be able to tell you all these things about yourself, including with a special focus on your health and your and wellness. So I thought, well, I tried everything. I'll try this. And when I started to get my results, and there's a lot with this kind of service. There's hundreds and hundreds of reports, each with a lot of pages. But I had time to go through it all because I wasn't working at the time, and I was blown away at how accurate and how helpful it was. And it was really the next shift in my life. It was what I've been searching for. Um, I don't know if you've ever, Elena, been to see like a psychic or a fortune teller or anyone like that and
No,
been
but
blown away.
it's I haven't, but it's a really big cultural thing in Russia where I grew up. They used to read on coffee cups, so
Hmm.
it's something that but I've never done it. No.
A lot of cultures have it, right? India, China, they each have over a
A lot of
billion
cultures,
people.
yeah.
It's completely normal there. Yeah. So anyway, with I have not either, but I've seen it in movies. Sorry, I have been to those people. I've never been blown away, but I've seen it
Hmm.
in movies. And people are like, oh my god. So that I've never been blown away by a psychic, but I was blown away by this as if it were a psychic because I was amazed, like almost like how does it know this stuff about me? How could it possibly
Mm.
predict stuff about obviously it gave me insights on the health challenges I was suffering with, but also things like the types of foods that I liked, or even things to do with personality. Whether you're introverted, extroverted, whether you tend to be, more aggressive, your sleeping habits, like all of this kind of stuff that I never would have guessed it knew all this stuff about me. And yeah, I was blown away that that was even possible, and it helped. It didn't give me all the answers. I won't claim that. Sometimes I work with people and it is really simple and it's just in their reports and that's all they need to know. With me, it was a bit more complicated, but it gave me the clues that I needed to then do further testing and speak to the right people and find the answers. And I'm very skeptical. So when I first did it, I was like, well, you know, it may be a coincidence. It's so accurate for me. So, like I said, then I did it with my wife. Then I did it with some of my business partners. Then with some friends, employees, and after going through the results with about I don't know 2 to 3 dozen other people who I knew well, so I knew you know
You could trust the
if it was
results.
accurate or
Yeah.
not. Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. Yeah, I wasn't relying on someone else just agreeing with me and having no idea if what they were telling me was the truth or not. I was like, yeah, this is incredible. This is amazingly accurate. And I was so interested to see not just that it helps. So I think there's three kind of purposes. For me, obviously, the thing that I really wanted was to get some clue as to what was going on with me. And that's one of the reasons why people use a service like that. But I think another thing is to, preventative. I think, for instance, I mentioned my mother had cancer several times. I think I'd always kind of assumed, despite on one hand having that, like, as I said, you shape your own destiny philosophy, but that was kind of more learned later in life. I think deep down, I also had a belief like that I was fated to also get this illness because my mother had it. And so I was delighted to see that, even though obviously it's no guarantee I won't get it, that hasn't been passed down to me to have any higher chance of having that particularly. So that was a great relief to see that.
Hmm.
Um, and then the third thing, and I think, and this one's a bit harder to explain, but it was so helpful to a big shift that it brought in my life, which I think was quite interesting and maybe not what you'd expect, is that it helped me to learn to be more compassionate towards myself and then also other people. So I'll give you two examples. I have a tendency to um, get like quite if something stresses me, I find it very hard to calm down and just relax. Like some people Teflon, right? It doesn't affect them very much, or they get over it very easily. That's not me, and I'd always judge myself for that. I'd always like, oh
Mm.
God, I wish I was more, emotionally resilient. I wish I was more easygoing. I wish I was more cool. And so, I was very interested to see in my genetics that, I have this tendency to genetically to not break down stress chemicals quickly. To the opposite, I break down stress chemicals very slowly.
Hmm.
And that's something that can be affected to some degree by what you do, but it's a genetic tendency. A lot of the way our body works, we have all these different genes that control these different enzymes, and what enzymes do is they transform one thing to another thing. And so in this case, it's transforming adrenaline and noradrenaline into the metabolites of that. And my one just doesn't work very quickly. So that's just something. And so rather than feeling inferior to other people who were much more easygoing, I just realized, I'm just different. And in fact, I learned that there's a benefit to being that way. Because what I learned is that people who break down stress chemicals very quickly, yes, they are more likely, or let's say apt, to thrive in an environment that is chaotic and dramatic and difficult, but they actually quite often quite struggle in an environment that is peaceful and relaxed and boring, which is what they would call it, um, because they break down stress chemicals so quickly, some people, that unless there is chaos and drama and like a war-like environment going on, their stress chemicals become too low and they feel bored. And they
Mhm.
feel like they can't focus, and they're the people who are much more likely to have ADHD and ADD, stuff like that.
Hmm.
So what I learned is I am more equipped genetically to thrive in a peaceful environment. Other people are more equipped genetically to thrive in a stressful environment. And Mother Nature or God or whatever you believe in has created both types because both have value, right? So rather
Yeah.
than like I'm good, you're not, or
Yeah.
you're good and I'm not. It's just realizing they're all different. So that's just one example. I won't go on, but so
Yeah.
learning to have compassion for myself and others. Why do you find it so hard to focus? Why do you keep creating drama in your life? Well, now I know why. Why do I struggle so much to get over things? Why can't I just be cool? Now I know why. So it
Mm.
just helps with that kind of compassion all around, I think.
Yeah, I love that. There's so much there. Let's just back up a little bit to, so did you figure out what it was for you? Figured out what it was for you. What was it, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, sure. The actual specific pain was something called sphincter body dysfunction, which is very unusual. And I think about 1% of the population has it, and of that, about 2% of them are men. So it's no wonder that none of the professionals thought about it. They don't know what causes it, so it's one of those things that is a syndrome. But my understanding is that there's a few factors. One of them is that when the liver becomes congested, something that's medically called cholestasis, then it's much more
Mhm.
likely to happen that this valve that goes between the gallbladder and the duodenum gets starts spasming and sometimes gets stuck. And yeah, it's a very unpleasant situation, very, very painful and potentially medically dangerous as well. Thank God I didn't get to that point. And there are other factors to contribute towards it, and one of them is toxicity. And I discovered that genetically, my body doesn't break down a particular heavy metal called lead very well.
Mm.
And I never had suspected this would be an issue because I'd done like hair analysis before and I never showed high lead. But then I tested my blood because the genetics seemed to make it worth testing. And it was sky high. It was the reference range is like 0 to 3, and mine was 9 times the highest level that it should be.
Wow.
27. 45 means you should be hospitalized and go
Wow.
undergo acute chelation. So it's closer to hospitalization than the vast majority of the population. And when I went to the GP, our medical doctors over here, I said, could this explain all my symptoms? This is before we discovered what it actually was. Because abdominal pain is one of the main symptoms of lead poisoning. And he said, yeah, totally, it could be. But they didn't pursue it despite it being potentially a cause. And then there are certain nutritional deficiencies which I discovered that I had had long term, despite eating a diet since my late 20s. So for over 10 years at the time, I'd been eating a diet that most people would consider extremely healthy. No processed food, no fast food, no junk food, no sweets, no alcohol, no cigarettes, no drugs, no this, no that. And yet I was eating a diet that was very deficient in particular nutrients, which were very important for me because of my genetics. And
Mm.
that had caused a situation which led to this cholestasis, which means the bile stops flowing, which means that this toxicity can build up, which then means it can create this muscle spasming. That's my understanding of what caused that. As I say, that's
Mm.
not all medical doctors agree that's the cause, but they don't have a different explanation. So that's the one that I've found that's actually been helpful.
And now you feel fine since like you've kind of healed yourself from that, or you still get it from time to time?
It shows up like mildly, but it's nothing like what it was. It's not debilitating. And what I realized is I'd had a low grade version of this cholestasis and digestive issues at least all of my adult life, which was
Mm.
why I'd always been underweight. So one of the other things that genetics helped me clarify is so I'd always been skinny, I'd always been underweight. My dad was very skinny, my mother was quite overweight. So I thought, well, I'd take after my dad, right? But then I got my genetic report back and it said you have a tendency to be average weight, not underweight. So I thought, well, that's not accurate. I mean, I'm 40 now. I've literally
Mm.
been, the bottom end of the BMI my whole life. That that can't be a coincidence. Um, but sure enough, as I started resolving these root cause digestive issues, getting this bile flowing correctly and the liver working properly, I started to be able to digest food much better than I ever had. And I started to gain weight, and now I am a normal weight, just
Mm.
normally. So in that case, the genetics were accurate. It's just that I had had a digestive issue for decades, which also were predicted in the genetic reports. My genetic reports also said that I had a high tendency to IBS, which is basically just your body doesn't digest nutrients very well. Again, it's another thing where they don't really understand what causes it. The doctors, they just tell you you've got
Mm.
it, and here are drugs to manage the situation. But yeah, it's probably more detail than you needed. But yeah,
Mm.
it's
No,
digestive issues.
it's very interesting because I've always been like into health, and like for most of my life I was always like exercising and sports and all of that. But it definitely have recently made a turn for myself because I was like, I really want to be at my top peak because I would like to start a family and I want to make sure like everything's functioning well. And now these days it seems to that fertility is a challenge for a lot of people. So
Hmm.
I realized that. And also I'm what they call a geriatric pregnancy after 35. So, or a potential. And so with age, obviously it becomes challenging and so on. And so, when you're saying this to me and how you felt, I relate because I did the hair and saliva test. So I've done all my blood work. I did
Hmm.
everything from I'm not even gonna list all the things. I've done also some of the genetic testing, like 400 different whatever tests, whatever,
Snips.
I don't know what they're called, but basically just the one that tells you like if you're prone to anything type thing. So basically, it's not quite exactly what you're talking about. It's more of like any abnormalities, any potential disease you can pass on to your child,
Yeah,
illnesses,
more medical.
more medical,
Yeah,
yeah, that kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
stuff. So like
Hmm.
I've done all of that, but then I'm like I know myself and I don't feel at my top peak. Like I know myself. Like I don't, I'm like I'm overall I'm healthy. I just did a sprint triathlon last Sunday. Like Overall good, but still I felt like something. And what was interesting is I did the hair and saliva test, and it came back with some nutritional stuff and so on. And then and I also have various toxins in my body,
Mm,
and they told me to like remove certain things from my diet. One of them was coffee and caffeine. And so
hmm
coffee was very toxic for me, and I cannot tell you how much better I feel without coffee. I haven't even
mm,
started the detox process, but just cutting out things that are like, this is probably what's causing this. And I was like, let me just like, I wasn't sure. I'm not like, I do like science. I like the kind of the natural approach, but I wasn't totally sold on it yet. And I was like, you know what, let me just try. Like, I'm a coffee addict. Okay. Like, I need my coffee. And I stopped it, and I seen a huge difference in I'm calmer, coffee and caffeine. So that's
hmm
to mention. I feel much calmer. I feel my digestive system has improved. I feel more energy. There's so many things. I feel like my body's processing food better. I know it sounds weird, and I tell my friends, I'm like, I know it sounds really odd, but I just feel like my digestion system is calm. I
hmm
don't even know how to explain it, but and so because I've cut out certain things, there was a couple of other things they told me to cut out. So anyway, so
Well,
it's
if I could just
phenomenal. Yeah.
comment on,
Yeah,
yeah, if I
please.
could just comment on coffee for a second. We have a caffeine sensitivity report in our system, and it's true that some people do worse with it than others, and that maybe was someone picked up on for you in one form or another. But I would say, in general, all the studies that show the benefits of coffee and caffeine, well, first of all, who are they funded by? Obviously, it's big business. But second of all, I don't believe that they're all corrupt. I think the other factor is they're never long-term studies. They're always over the course of a few weeks or a few months. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there are real benefits to coffee over a few weeks or a few months. It speeds up the metabolism temporarily, which gets every system of the body working better temporarily. But the problem is there are very few studies that are decades long of the impact of coffee. And the mechanism by which coffee works is it suppresses adenosine, which is they call it an inhibitory neurotransmitter. But what they mean by inhibitory is calming or relaxing. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, it blocks your nervous system's capacity to relax, which is potentially problematic. It also depletes your body of potassium and magnesium, which are two very important minerals, which again help your body, even all the way down to the cellular level, to relax. So I'm not saying coffee and caffeine are bad for everyone, but I am saying like over 90% of people take it. Probably over 50% of people would be better off if they didn't, because
Yeah.
it's depleting them of essential minerals that they're already low on. I would say that there are a couple of different types of people in from this perspective. I was going to say the other thing I really like to focus on is hormones. Talking about pregnancy,
Yeah.
um, so I love to see the genetics of hormones with people. So, for instance, I have a high tendency for cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and then a tendency for low levels of thyroid, which is more like a real bodily energy. It's your body's metabolism. And so when you have low thyroid function, the most common thing is that people gain weight and they're kind of slow and they're kind of sluggish and they think slowly and the digestive system works slowly and everything's just kind of slows down. They feel cold. But for some people, especially those who have a tendency for high cortisol like me, they have the opposite response. Like they go into this type A adrenalized kind of mode. And if you have that tendency, if you feel like you're that kind of type A person, if you can relate to that, then I would say stimulants like coffee are a really bad idea. And simultaneously, they will be all the more appealing to you because you want to get as much done as possible. You want to have as much energy as possible. And you want to have as much mental clarity as possible. And caffeine will give you all those things, but it will do that by raising your level of stress chemicals even more when you're already
Mm-hmm.
imbalanced. So I relate. I think I was doing 10 to 20 shots of espresso a day during that time, like in
Mm.
my 20s that I talked about. And it helped me to, um, you know, have a lot of energy, but it's also very depleting. And when I say depleting, people are like, oh, what does that actually mean scientifically? They're skeptical. And I was like, okay, I'll be very specific then. Magnesium, potassium, right? These
Mm-hmm.
basic building blocks that every cell is dependent on. It's not disputed that it absolutely depletes those. And by that it raises blood pressure. And magnesium is an extremely important mineral that
Mm-hmm.
most people are already deficient in, even without taking coffee. that is essential in order to have real energy, not adrenal energy. It's essential in order to be able to relax, which is why it's often sold as a sleep aid. It's essential for your muscles to be relaxed, which is why they often, give it to people for sports performance and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's, necessary for over 1,000 of these enzymes in your body. So anything that's depleting you of that long term is potentially a bad idea. Not always. Again, depends on genetics. I would say that people who don't have genetics like me, people who have genetics of maybe having low levels of cortisol and low levels of adrenaline, they might actually be balanced out by coffee, right? I'm not saying because it is raising those stress chemicals a bit. I'm not saying it's bad for everyone, but I do think it's bad
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of people. And again, this is something that finding out about your genetics can help you clarify.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that because I think, when people, I think we're as a society, we tend to be like, well, no, like I don't need to go that extreme or that, but maybe you do, maybe you don't, but you won't know until you test yourself. Like you won't know until you test yourself. And I'm continuously
Sorry, what's
surprised,
extreme? When you say
like
go that extreme?
extremes in terms of like, oh, you have to stop coffee, or you have to cut this out completely, this thing that you
Okay.
love to eat or drink, right? Or you can't do this, so this is really bad for you. So there seems to be, that's how people perceive it. And I think because a lot of it is there's a lack of education around this topic, because your regular
Mm.
general practitioner is not going to do that. And I'm also in the wellness space, so I work with clients like in personal training space where, and we'll talk about, getting in shape or just feeling better, and I'm like, well, it's not just about the exercise. There's a number of other things. And I was like, have you checked your vitamin levels, like your nutrient levels, like in your body? And I'm surprised at how many people that are in their 50s and 60s never, like, unless something is wrong, they don't check it. Like just,
Mm.
prophylactic, what is it called? Like proactive. There's a word for prophylactic or something like that, whatever it's
Yeah,
called.
yeah.
Yeah, like just check it. And it's true because your doctor could probably do it, but you have to tell them, and you have to like you know what I mean, give some kind of symptom almost. But even then, some of the things you're talking about, some of the tests that I've done, they're not covered by insurance. So it's like you have to go out of that as well. So it's like we're not really encouraged. I know you're in the UK, but in the US, we're not really encouraged to even go deeper into our health, because you know what I'm saying? So it's almost like, I don't know, why is that? Why do you think that is?
In the UK, it's almost worse because our taxes go to pay for this health service, but then they treat you like a criminal if you want any kind of testing done, unless you are almost dead. So,
Mm,
um, they've both got their downsides. Um, why do I think it is the way it is? Well, uh, you know, if you want the deeper answer, I think the RFK Jr., who's currently running as a presidential candidate in your country, is doing quite a good job of exposing why it is the way it is. I think there's a massive level of corruption that's going
mm,
on. There's a what's the word? Conspiring. They've made the word conspiracy synonymous with like delusion, but conspiring is what powerful people have always done throughout the ages in order to get more power for themselves. And so there's a significant amount of collusion or whatever between government, who have the power to force people to do things based on threats of police and violence, and will throw you in jail and all the rest of it, and then private companies whose main goal is to make profit. And you see this in the head of a pharmaceutical company will become the head of the regulatory agency that's supposed to care about health, and back again, like so. Um, Even most of the research, a lot of people think, oh, the problem is big business and corporations, and all they care about is profit. But I think if that's all there was, it wouldn't be that bad. The problem is also that all the government bodies that we pay our tax money to, the people in charge of that will not pay for research into any health issue unless it is
mm,
something that is approved of by the pharmaceutical companies in one form or another. So there is a massive focus on um, not focusing on health. If you think about all the scandals, I mean, at the time of recording, there's congressional hearings just today about health matters, and it's like all these health companies are focusing on creating even deadlier viruses, like taking a
mm,
virus that has a a 1% kill rate and turning it into a 50% kill rate, or taking a virus that's very deadly but that is extremely difficult to transmit and making it easily transmissible between. It's like, why is that? Why is that where the money is going? Why is
Mm.
that the focus? I know how corrupt the system is, because, as I say, I've been in the health industry for a long time, and everyone in the alternative health industry, whether it's supplements or herbs or even health food, stores and all the rest of it, the main thing that they're concerned about, and the only thing that most of these agencies are interested in, is the claims you're making. So you're not allowed to say that anything might actually cure you, prevent a disease. That's like the thing that you always have to say. This whatever it is cannot prevent, cure, diagnose any kind of disease. That's what they're concerned. But what they're not concerned about is making sure that what you're selling is free of toxins. Would like, if the goal of any of these government agencies was actually to protect your health, they should be putting the vast majority of their focus on checking all these people, whether it's supplement companies, whether it's McDonald's, whether it's the grocery stores, all the rest of it. Let's keep testing stuff and making sure it is not poisonous. That should be like the number one thing they're focused on. And then let's test the water supply and make sure it's not poisonous. Let's test the air and make sure it's not poisonous. There's almost no focus on that. It's all focused on protecting the interests of the so-called health industries that already exist. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that may be a deeper answer than you were after. Why
No,
that is
it's
the way it is we can only speculate, but that is the way it is.
yeah. Yeah, listen, somebody's making money. So it's, somebody's making money, and that's all people need to know. So, and it's just, hopefully they're not making money off of your health. So, that's
Well,
my hope. I
but
hope whoever's listening, yeah.
I would say, but there's nothing wrong with commerce. I don't think, like, it
Sure,
going back
sure,
to the
yeah.
ages. The problem is the monopolistic practices and the forcing
Mm,
anyone that offers an alternative, like, out of business, or at the best marginalizing them and mocking them and all the rest of it. Like, even as you said, you go to a doctor, you ask for a test for something that you understand is potentially very important, but if it's not in their book of things that they have treatments for, then it's they're not interested. They're not interested in testing for Lyme disease. They're not interested in testing for if you have mercury. They're not interested in testing to see if you have a vitamin B1 deficiency. They're not interested in testing for a lot of hormonal issues, even though they're so crucially important, because the solution is too simple. I think a massive amount of damage was done when they made the shift to make it so that it's illegal to sell any kind of thyroid glandular, except for as a prescription drug. So
what is that?
throughout,
Hmm.
so the thyroid gland is, this part of the body. It provides this thing called thyroid hormone, which gives the signal to every cell in your
Okay.
body to
Hmm.
create energy. So there's all this talk these days of metabolic health and metabolic syndrome and mitochondria and all the rest of it. But almost no one's talking about the most important thing, which is the thyroid. If the
Mm,
thyroid is not putting out enough T3, which is active thyroid hormone, then your cells will not create enough energy and you will never be truly healthy. You will always be struggling. And so
mm,
we've known this for a long time. And some people genetically just don't make enough thyroid hormone. And some people, because of the amount of toxicity that they're taking in, their thyroid gland is not making enough thyroid hormone. And some people, for many other reasons, are not making enough thyroid hormone. And throughout most of our history, we would kind of eat the whole animal a lot of the time. Vegetarianism and veganism relatively, unusual throughout most of our history. So most of our ancestors, most of the time, were eating the whole animal, and they were eating thyroid glands pretty regularly. And so thyroid supplementation was just part of the diet, like
mm,
it still is in some other, in some countries where they do still eat the whole animal. We either, don't eat animals, and much more commonly we only eat like the muscle, the flesh, and we're not eating the heart. We're not eating all of these parts of the animal that have these interesting compounds that are good for us. But with everything else, if you go to a butcher, you can get an animal heart. If you can get an animal adrenal gland, you can get an animal pancreas, you can get an animal thymus, you can get all of these organs and glands from an animal if you want. to support your health. But the one thing you cannot get, and it's illegal for them to provide it for you without a prescription from a doctor, is thyroid. You can't get the thyroid gland of an animal. It's only
Hmm.
available as a prescription drug. Now, 100 years ago, if you go into a doctor's office and you say, I'm starting to gain weight, I'm feeling cold more often, I'm feeling depressed, or I'm feeling anxious, or both. My mental clarity is not what it once was. I'm low in energy. I'm starting to get constipation. I'm starting to get digestive issues. I'm starting to get allergies. I'm starting to get frequent infections. I'm starting to get skin issues. I'm starting to get swelling and water retention. They would, and also if you have high cholesterol in your blood, they would go, "Oh, you probably got an underactive thyroid," and they would just give you a little bit of thyroid glandular in a pill,
Mm-hmm.
Armour thyroid, which at the time cost almost nothing. And if you felt nothing, then next time they give you a bit more. And if you feel better, then they say, okay, that's a good amount. And that's it. And so all of these chronic issues. And then about 60 years ago, 50 years ago, depending on where we're talking about, they started to say, oh, no, rather than giving it to everyone who needs it, we're only going to give it to people who test right at the top of the range of a very specific test, which is called TSH, which isn't actually even very helpful or very relevant in a lot of cases. It kind of fluctuates wildly. And so basically, about probably 30 to 40% of the people would, let's say, I'm not diagnosing anyone with a disease, but let's say they would feel significantly better if they were getting thyroid support.
Hmm.
And they only actually give it to about 1 or 2% of the population. So we have all these people with chronic health issues. And so now, if you're overweight, rather than giving thyroid, in the past they give you diet pills, like ephedrine, all that kind of things. Nowadays they give you Ozempic. If you're depressed, then they put you on SSRIs. If you're anxious, then they put you on Valium or Xanax or something like that. If you have high cholesterol, they put you on cholesterol-lowering drugs. If you're low in energy, well, then you drink coffee all day. Like if you've got constipation, they'll put you on a laxative. Like all these different drugs and all these different things came into effect because they didn't just give you the natural thing, which was the gland of an animal that probably your ancestors have been eating for many thousands of years. And, so why did they make that shift to stop giving people what they needed? Was it a conspiracy? Was it stupidity? Was it deliberate sabotage? Because, as you
Hmm.
just said earlier, you can make a lot more money from people when their thyroid glands are low and you're not supporting their thyroid gland. It's hard to say.
Hmm. I didn't know that about the thyroid gland. I never thought about it, but I was always skeptical about the ranges that they give you, like when they
Hmm.
say like this is the healthy range, like because I've read some things about it, and it's not really helpful. So it requires like a lot more, right? Like it's not very helpful. Like ranges, I forget what it was, but it's like that range is not really where it should be, or something like that. In general,
Yeah,
like about the ranges, right?
it's there was a general shift in medicine. Is like if you're not dying, or if whatever it is doesn't mean you could die soon, then they're not interested. So
Mm.
the problem is, at 30 years old, you can have an underactive thyroid gland that ruins the quality of your life, but you could still go for another 40 years and be fine. Like you won't
Mm.
die. That's the key thing.
Right, I got
So
you.
it's just you're going to suffer. You're going to have allergies and intolerances. You're going to have chronic infections. You're going to have digestive issues. You're going to have low energy and fatigue. You're going to have depression, but it won't kill you. And so, do you see what I mean? And so
Right,
their
right, right.
range, that it's not that they're wrong by their standards, because their standard is if you're between 0 and 4.5, sorry, yeah, pretty much 0 and 4.5 TSH, that's the usual normal range, then you're fine. And what they mean by
Mm.
fine is you won't die soon, but not that you feel great. And that's
Right,
why
right.
I tend to focus on thyroid and hormonal optimization rather than disease. I'm not telling you that you or anyone else listening that they have thyroid disease, but I'm just saying that a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, especially if you relate to let's say more than half of those symptoms I just listed, you might feel better if your thyroid was optimized. And that's true for a lot of hormones. One thing this is known about more these days, and it's quite recent, is testosterone for men and
Mm-hmm.
progesterone for women. You know, um, by the time you're age 40 for a man and 40 for a woman, A 40-year-old man is not going to have an optimal level of testosterone anymore. It might be okay, but it's not great. A 40-year-old woman is definitely not going to have an optimized level of progesterone anymore. Well,
Mm.
why does that matter? Because for men, testosterone is the number one anti-stress hormone in your body. For women, progesterone is the number one anti-stress hormone in your body. So if you're not, if your level of that crucially important anti-stress hormone is half of what it was when you felt at your best, you can just accept that. You might be able to get it back to an optimal level again with lifestyle and dietary changes. That's possible at the age of 40, but by the time you're 50, it's going to be a lot more difficult, even if you're having a healthy lifestyle. By the time you're 60, if you're a woman, it's almost impossible to have it at an optimal level, even if you've got an extremely healthy lifestyle. And so, then it's a choice. Do I want to support myself to feel good or not? And you talked about fertility earlier.
Mm.
Uh, Bioidentical progesterone is a miraculous thing for fertility, and also for taking bioidentical progesterone during pregnancy massively reduces the incidence of morning sickness. Taking bioidentical progesterone during pregnancy, especially the second and third trimesters, massively increases the IQ of the baby. Many studies have shown. And taking bioidentical progesterone or its metabolite allopregnanolone massively reduces the incidence of postpartum depression. Because what's supposed to happen is, as a woman, the reason why some women love being pregnant, despite kind of you dragging this huge weight around you and it's robbing you of all your nutrition and you should feel terrible. But what happens to women when they're pregnant is they're flooded with progesterone. So many women feel better, and many of them, actually get healthier while they're pregnant. But then
Mm.
once you give birth, your progesterone level crashes, because progest is like progestate, so it's a gestating hormone more than anything. And then your prolactin goes up, and prolactin is prolactate. So then you can breastfeed. But prolactin is also a hormone that opposes dopamine. And dopamine is the neurotransmitter that makes you feel good, that gives
Mm-hmm.
you mental clarity, that makes you feel motivated. And a lack of dopamine is the number one cause of depression to me. So, of course, women are going to feel depressed after they give birth and fatigued. It's not just because they don't sleep and all the other stuff, all the practical stuff. It is also because their hormones, the progesterone,
Right.
the thing that keeps you from being stressed, has just crashed. The prolactin, which makes you depressed, has just spiked, and of course you don't feel at your best. And so all of this stuff is the most obvious thing in the world to me now, because I've learned about it, but it's not obvious to almost everyone, including most doctors. Now, I'm not saying I know better than doctors. Like, I have a doctor on my podcast regularly. We discuss all this stuff. She knows more about this than me. Some doctors absolutely do know about it, but generally, when people feel like they could feel better, I say you need to go to a hormone doctor, but not a normal hormone doctor. You need to go to a doctor who specializes in optimizing hormones, not
Mm.
because if you go to an endocrinologist, a normal one, they're just looking at, is this thing going to kill you soon? Right?
Yeah.
Like, is your insulin so incredibly low, or whatever, right? That's what they're concerned with. Is your cortisol so high you got Cushing's, or is it so low you got Addison's, or all the. If it's not going to kill you soon, they don't care. They tell you that you're fine. They send you on your way. You're still not good though, so you have to go to someone who's actually focused on optimizing. And back to the genetic thing, the reason why it's the very first step of my 7-step system is because it's very good to know what your baseline is. Like, as I said, for me, for instance, to know I've got a tendency for high cortisol and low thyroid, that tells me a huge amount. And then the blood test will confirm that and all the rest of it. But another one that I see commonly is a hormone that's not focused on a lot is oxytocin. If you have a tendency for low oxytocin, oxytocin is the hormone, it's known as the love hormone, but it's really the thing that makes you feel satisfied. It's almost kind of more the feeling of being loved rather than loving. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, I am loved, I am okay. And when you naturally genetically run low on that, you absolutely are far more likely, and I've seen this again and again. It's not easy to test oxytocin, but I just see it based on people's genetics. Whenever I see someone who has low levels of oxytocin in their genetics, they have almost always have very addictive tendencies. They tend to overdo things. They overeat, they overdrug, they oversex, they overwork, they over everything. And it's because they can never feel satisfied because they
Mm-hmm.
don't have that capacity. And so you can, again, with a good doctor will give you what's it called, off-label intranasal oxytocin, and then you can actually feel, oh, I can actually, like, you actually feel satiated. And they prescribe it off-label sometimes for drug addicts and people who overeat, because again, it just makes you feel satiated. But
Hmm.
to know that about yourself genetically, again, back to the compassion point, excuse me, you can let yourself off the hook, you know.
Yeah. Listen, there's so much I could spend hours. I have like this should have been like a 5-hour podcast on its own. Seriously, I have so many follow-up questions, but I'm mindful of your time.
Oh, excuse
Um,
me, Elena.
yeah,
I've got to get some water. I realised I
yeah,
haven't
yeah.
done
It's
it
fine. It's fine.
in ages. Yeah, sorry. I realised I've been talking today. I forgot to
That's
drink water.
okay.
Okay,
I'll edit it out.
sorry.
So being mindful of your time, but I want to um just there's so much insights that you've given the audience and myself, and as I'm kind of learning about these things, and so thank you for that. But I'm curious, like, as we wrap up this conversation, where does one start? Like, what is, somebody's listening and say, okay, like, I think I might want to go deeper into this. Maybe I want to educate myself a little bit more about this. Where does one start? Or maybe they feel like, they're going through the journey of, like, they've gone to every doctor, nothing is helping. Where do they go? How to start? What should they think about?
Well, yeah, if you want to start, based on the stuff that I've talked about, I would say you have one or two options. If you are open to finding out what your genetics can teach you, which is the first step of my 7-step system, which I would highly recommend, again, because it just tells you the baseline. I still also recommend other tests like the hair tests and blood tests and stuff that you've been doing. But I just like to start with genetics, and the doctors I work with feel the same way, because it just tells you, right, this is what's set in stone. And now we'll also do other tests to see what's going on with you now, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. And that tells them a lot. So yeah, if you're interested in that, my website is called geneticinsights.co. I won't, as you say, we're kind of out of time, so I won't go into all the details about how it's different and better, but check out the website. And one of the things I'll just say is I created it. The main goal of it was that it's simple enough that you don't need to be an expert to understand it. So there are a lot of systems out there that are only like you need a doctor to explain it to you. That's not ours. Ours is simple. Um, and the other thing is that it's very affordable. So for the level of quality of what you're getting, which is, there's several dozen engineers and several dozen scientists who've like put together this machine that does these very complex calculations to provide you the information that we do. Ours is by far the most affordable in the world, as far as
Mm.
I'm aware. Um, so yeah, geneticinsights.co. And in fact, speaking of affordability for your listeners or viewers, I'd love to offer a special discount. So if you use coupon code SHIFT, SHIFT, all capital letters, then you can get a further 25% off at geneticinsights.co. Now, if you don't want to buy anything, that's totally fine. You just want to learn what I'm talking about. If you want to go to my podcast, Elwin Robinson, if you want to go to youtube.com/Elwin Robinson, and I'm also on Spotify and Apple and all the rest of it. I have a lot of episodes where I talk about this. So, you're interested in what I said about the thyroid? I've got an episode about the thyroid. You're interested in what I said about progesterone? I've got an episode about that. I've got an episode about oxytocin. I've got an episode about the heart and the blood sugar and about energy and brain health and, whatever, like pretty much if you can think about it, if it's a topic, digestive health, immune health, all that kind of stuff, I've got an episode on it. So if I realize you might not listen to every episode that I have, but if there's a specific topic that you're interested in, you'd like to hear my take on it, then I probably have one in the podcast. And I am working on, but it's not out yet, a book where I really outline my system in full. And it's really related to, stuff you even talked about today, Elena, like, being aware of nutritional deficiencies and toxins and all that kind of stuff. But those are two of the 7 steps. But yeah, as I say, those two are steps 2 and 3 for me, the nutrients and the toxins, because I feel they are fundamental, foundational problems. Nutrients is really the stuff that you are built out of, and toxins
Hmm.
is really the stuff that is poisoning you. So that's very, very important. But there's still the number one step is genetics, because again, I just want to know that blueprint. Like when I work with someone, I want to understand, okay, what cards were they dealt? What's their starting place?
Yeah.
And so I think that's very helpful for anyone to know. As I said, whether you're trying to resolve something right now, or if you're just trying to prevent something, or even if you just want to understand yourself and maybe how you are compared to other people around you better.
Mm. And you guys offer this globally, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The only place we don't offer it is if you have a billing address in the EU because of the crazy tax situation over there.
Hmm.
But every other country in the world, we have plenty of clients from New Zealand, Australia, or Singapore, or South Africa, or whatever it might be, and of course, a very large amount in the US.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for everything you've shared. It's phenomenal. I'm definitely gonna stay tuned to your podcast, and I would love to even do a part two because I think there's so much that we can talk about here. But maybe we can do a part two after I go through my kind of detox, so to say,
Hmm.
and maybe I'll do a genetic testing through you guys as well, and then we can talk about it. Like that'll be interesting, like firsthand experience, and then we can have a chat about it. I think that'll be cool to do. But
That'd be awesome.
last question I ask all of my guests is, what is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
That's a good question. I wasn't expecting it, and I have nothing prepared. Let me think.
Take your
Ask
time.
themselves more often. Well, all right. I'll frame this in a specific situation. This is a question I love to ask myself during periods of great adversity. So when I was in agonizing pain, I had no way of escaping it. When things are really down, financially, whatever. This is a question I like to ask, emotionally, whatever. What can I do right now that will mean that at some point in the future, not only is this resolved, but more importantly, I will look back at this moment and say to myself, I'm so glad this happened because it led me to this moment. And I love that as a reframe for, as I said, extreme pain, extreme adversity, to see the opportunity in there, to see. I feel like, and I think the word grateful is important. Like, how can I get to the point where I actually feel grateful this has happened to me? So yeah,
Mm,
that's my favorite question to ask in the worst possible times, and it is what I asked during that time that I told you about, and many other times as well. And it's always been the case. And now, of course, I do feel that way genuinely. Speaking to you
yeah,
right now, and I'm so glad I went through that horrific pain because I never would have found all this awesome stuff if that hadn't happened to me. So
yeah.
yeah,
I love it. I love it. Elvin, thank you so much for your time. It's really been a pleasure. I've learned a lot. I'm sure my audience learned a lot. I'm going to share all the links that you've mentioned in the show notes. And thank you for the discount as well. My audience appreciates it. And I very much look forward to doing this again with you.
great. Thank you, Elena.